but they're tired all the time and their digestion doesn't work. And oh, lo and behold, some of these extreme endurance athletes that have been going for years and decades are now developing at an alarming rate heart problems because the heart is overworked and scarred and inflamed over and over from these overly stressful workout patterns. And it turns out to be a risk in a similar realm as to someone who doesn't use the heart enough. Look, you're 150, 160 pounds. You go for a 5 mile run, you're generating 2.3 million pounds of impact trauma. And most people, due to living a comfortable, convenient, and sedentary driven modern life, don't have the overall fitness, adaptability, musculoskeletal resiliency, mobility, flexibility, all those things to absorb that impact trauma
Hey,
appropriately.
Health Junkies. On this episode of the Health Fix podcast, I'm interviewing Brad Kearns. He's a New York Times best-selling author. He's a Guinness World Record-setting professional speed golfer. He was the #1 USA ranked Masters level track and field high jumper in 2020. And he's a former national champion and number three world ranked professional athlete. He hosts the Be Rad podcast. I've been on that one a couple times, and promotes the idea of pursuing peak performance with passion throughout life. Brad's an awesome dude. I've gotten to know him over the last few years, and he really is all in on helping folks live their best life, but also really understanding what moves the needle in fitness and what is going to keep you injury free, not hurting yourself, and just keeping you healthy so you can do the things you love for longer in life. Today, we're going to be kind of talking about something super controversial. The idea that maybe running all the time isn't the best way to look at fitness in the long run. We're going to talk about walking, and we're going to talk about his new book with Mark Sisson that's coming out in the new year called Born to Walk, which is kind of a play on the old run to walk concept that we've all probably heard of. So I want you to be thinking about something during this podcast, that the concept of the suffering to really get results in fitness. Do we need to really suffer? Or can we work hard, get things done, keep ourselves free from injury, and have a healthier, more mobile life as we get older? All right. Welcome to the Health Fix podcast, where health junkies get their weekly fix of tips, tools, and techniques to have limitless energy, sharp minds, and fit physiques for life. Brad Kearns, welcome back to the Health Fix podcast.
Dr. Jannine, I am so happy to connect with you. And, we stay in touch. You're doing some great work. You've helped me personally with my health concerns. And now we're going to help everyone in the fitness world recalibrate some of these flawed notions that have been hanging around for a long time, thanks to marketing hype. And we got a bright new future ahead.
I'm looking forward to it because, as I mentioned before, I feel like everything I've ever known has been a lie, and really it boils down to this marketing stuff and selling things. And I'm like, oh, fallen victim to many things. And definitely I think it's a point to just really, for folks who are listening, to be thinking about, like, okay, we've been brainwashed about running, and we're going to talk about it a little bit today. Me being a recovering marathon addict and seeing the changes in my body and seeing the changes in my patients' bodies, this is relevant information to talk about. So, nevertheless, first thing we got to go towards is what you told me and blew my mind about marathon distance stuff. This 26.2 was actually a lie. You tell. You tell.
Right. So,
Tell us more.
Mark Sisson and I have a new book coming out, and it's called Born to Walk. And of course, that's a play on this widely glorified notion that humans are born to run. And the evolutionary biology, of course, is highly valid, and we have these amazing endurance attributes that make us one of the most impressive endurance creatures on Earth. We can actually, carry on for long distances, and we can sweat, and we're bipedal, and so all that stuff's fine and dandy. But somehow, thanks to the running boom over the last 50 years, we have been socialized to think that becoming competent at steady state, long distance running is something that will bring you health and fat reduction and all these promises. And it hasn't really turned out that way. And the reason is because humans are not really genetically adapted to put on cushy running shoes and run down the road every day or day after day for a certain number of weekly mileage, which is kind of the cultural programming in the endurance scene. But you jumped in with a fun way to enter into this story, and most endurance-minded listeners know that the modern day marathon of 26.2 miles was inspired by this amazing Greek running soldier named Phidippides. And there's a chain of running stores called Phidippides, and he's come to prominence these days as the inspiration for the modern marathon. And as the story goes, Phidippides ran 26 miles from the city of Marathon to the city of Athens to announce victory in battle. He said Nike Nike Nenikayam, which in Greek means we won, rejoice, rejoice, we conquer. And then, as the story goes, he dropped dead. And this amazing legend has now imprinted on on people's skin when they get their tattoo when they finish the marathon, and on bumper stickers. And that was the foundation. And it's a complete fabrication, so it never happened. There was an amazing Greek running soldier. They're called hemerodromai. That's their job in the military, is to run and send messages. So they're foot messengers. That's the translation. And so this guy Phidippides was an amazing legend of Greek history, but his story got twisted and turned into this modern day fabrication in a late 19th century poem. So this guy made up a poem about Phidippides. He made up the idea that he ran from Marathon to Athens to announce a victory. And that's what inspired the modern Olympic Games in 1896. They said, hey, let's also put in a long distance event inspired by Phidippides, which was the fake poem that was written, soon before that. So what Phidippides really did was an amazing element of Greek history and actually world history, um, because he was a major force in as a messenger. And so he actually ran from Athens to Sparta, which is 153 miles, and he did it in 36 hours because he urgently needed the Sparta's help in battle. And he got to Sparta and he found out that they were on vacation. And so he had to run back to Athens in double time to tell them, hey, we're not getting their help till later because the Spartans are on vacation. So he ran 306 miles in uh, 72 hours, 4 days. And it was one of the great, modern feats of endurance in recorded history. But the marathon, if we want to honor Phidippides, and he did not die at the end, he came back to Athens and said, "Hey, we don't have the Spartans' help for a while." So if we want to honor Phidippides, the marathon should be 306 miles, not 26.2. So I think the reason that we emphasize this at the start of the book, Born to Walk, is because we want to, convince you that these modern distances are not like the ultimate human athletic achievement, but rather just an arbitrary distance driven by a ton of marketing hype, because now endurance sports are big business. And I'm putting triathlon in there too, which was my background, as you know, the Ironman triathlon, the greatest achievement of the triathlon scene, was also kind of a whimsical, as the story goes, and this is a true story, a bunch of drunk Navy men were sitting around at an awards banquet after doing the Waikiki Rough Rider Swim, and they were arguing which was the toughest event in the Hawaiian Islands: the 2.4-mile Waikiki Rough Rider Swim, the 112-mile bicycle ride around Oahu, that's the distance around the island, or the 26.2 Honolulu Marathon. And someone said, well, if someone could do all three of those in one day, they would be a real Ironman. And in 1978, I believe it was 13 people decided to do it, and that was the first Ironman. And now it's this huge global multi-million dollar brand where everyday normal people, not super buff Navy men that had free time and were, in elite athleticism, now we're telling everyone to go out there and train for this crazy 140.6 mile total event. And so my contention here, and I want everyone to absorb this for a moment, I think the world would be way better off if the marathon were 13.1 miles instead of a half marathon, make the marathon 13 miles. It's still an extremely long way to run. And if the Ironman were a half Ironman, we'd definitely be better off because most people, when they finish an Ironman, are shuffling along in some sort of a fast walk or a very slow jog, and they're just barely hanging on to the finish line rather than making it somewhat of an athletic event where they're actually moving at a good pace and checking their splits and trying to be an actual racer, which is possible for many more people if the Ironman were actually a half Ironman.
I mean, it makes sense. Having done these things, not Ironman, but marathons and half marathons myself. Yeah, when you sit at the end, watch people come across, it's a half marathon looks a lot prettier than the full marathon.
Plus, all the spectators don't have to wait so long. And I used to announce, I mean, I raced a lot of hard races in my triathlon career, and I was on the pro circuit for 9 years, and it was really tough. But the toughest race I ever did was announcing an Ironman triathlon with no backup announcer. So I announced for 17 hours straight because the race is a 16-hour cutoff. You have to finish by midnight and you start at 7 a.m. or whatever. And so I get on the mic an hour before the swim to get everybody warmed up in the morning and then carry on the entire day. And it's a big ordeal to train for. It's a big ordeal on the competition day. And all this is in the name of health and that great human spirit of conquering challenges. And all that's fantastic. And I know there's some listeners right now that are maybe even put off a little bit because endurance is a major positive element of their life. It's the centerpiece of their social gathering and their social community. And there's so many wonderful things that people have turned their lives around from sitting around and not exercising or being addicted to, harmful substances. And now they're quote unquote addicted to running or to triathlon. And of course, that's a much better addiction than addicted to bad stuff. However, it's still an addiction. And these are some of the things that we sweep under the rug as we glorify these extreme events. So, the argument and the thing we're trying to do with the book Born to Walk is to, um, you know, uh, you know, strongly urge you to approach your endurance goals in a healthy manner rather than a destructive, overly stressful manner where they end up on your table and you're trying to figure out what's wrong with them because it's subclinical. They seem to be a healthy person, but they're tired all the time and their digestion doesn't work. And oh, lo and behold, some of these extreme endurance athletes that have been going for years and decades are now developing at an alarming rate heart problems because the heart is overworked and scarred and inflamed over and over from these overly stressful workout patterns. And it turns out to be a risk in a similar realm as to someone who doesn't use the heart enough.
Yeah. That's a really good point, the heart. I want to talk about that. First, I have to say one thing. Did you know that there is a Marathon, Wisconsin and an Athens, Wisconsin, and there are 13.44 miles separated between those two cities? I would run that. I just want to put that in there for fun
I wonder if
funsies.
they named it accordingly, uh, you know,
I don't
just for the
know.
heck of it.
I'm gonna have to dive into it because my best friend lives in Athens. So we're gonna have to figure it out because we're talking two small farm towns.
They have a sense of humor. They said, "Hey, let's do it. Let's do Athens and Marathon, and then if we go there and back, it'll be 26 miles."
There we go. There we go. I don't know. Had to throw that in there. But the heart here is a big thing, right? I've been seeing a lot more athletes with higher calcium scores. So they're getting the calcium scoring done. They're higher scores. They're thinking, what in the world's going on? Their cholesterol's up. They can't seem to get it down. They run more. It doesn't change. And then we do tests like the metabolomics or different types of tests for oxidative stress, and the oxidative stress is off the charts. I'm guessing you're probably seeing that in some of the endurance athletes that you guys are working with too.
Sure, and it's not in dispute or some crazy theory by Dr. Jannine. And this is, known science. There's an arm of exercise physiology called the excess endurance exercise hypothesis, and it's showing the data that if you exceed a certain amount of training volume, your graph, if you envision a horseshoe-shaped graph, it starts to decline down to where your health benefits become less and your disease risk increases. And that's just due to the chronic overproduction of stress hormones and chronically overstressing and inflaming your body with these difficult workouts. So everyone knows that, the right dose of anything is the thing that's going to give you the best health outcomes. And if you overdo it, you can get yourself into real trouble. And I think the most glaring and obvious example in the running scene is the rate of overuse injuries. And there's a variety of resources quoting numbers. We're spouting the uh, consensus of about 50% of regular runners are injured every year, and 25% of regular runners are injured at any given time. These numbers are absolutely astonishing and embarrassing because they're bigger than the NFL, Jannine. The NFL annual injury rate is 31%, 8% at any given time. So if no one's tackling you on the roads and trails of America and the world, there's a big problem here. And the overuse injuries occur because running is quite it's a high impact traumatic event, especially when you're going for miles and miles. And unlike walking, where there's no impact load beyond one times body weight because there's 1 foot on the ground at all times during the walking stride. That's the definition of the difference between walking and running is that running has what's called a flight phase. So both legs are in the air. And then when you land, you are generating typically with a slow paced or medium paced jogger, it's around 2 to 3 times body weight on every single stride. So if you go for a 5 mile run, there's a calculation in the book. You're 150, 160 pounds. You go for a 5 mile run, you're generating 2.3 million pounds of impact trauma. And most people, due to living a comfortable, convenient, and sedentary driven modern life, don't have the overall fitness, adaptability, musculoskeletal resiliency, mobility, flexibility, all those things to absorb that impact trauma appropriately. Therefore, they will run their way into injury routinely. So the problem is that the sport itself is overly stressful for most people. So most people with an ambition to become a runner and sign up for the half marathon or the marathon or whatever the goals are and the programming and the group and the community they join, they are running their way to injury and to accelerated aging in a variety of ways. One of them we touched on a bit was the potential for overstressing the cardiovascular system.
Okay. Okay. So of course, I got to bring up the big topic that I hear and I mentioned earlier to you before we hit record. One of the first things women will say when they're like, I'm gaining weight, I need to run again or I need to start running, right? There is that mindset of like I can lose weight because all what we see is the runners who are thin who are winning these races. And of course, we'll get into skinny fat, I'm sure, here soon. But everyone thinks about that, right? Because one, I think we've been brainwashed to think like if we start running, I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't think the same thing in my 20s when I
Hmm.
started doing the whole marathon stuff. So, we've got the frequent injuries. We got women who are starting to gain weight, estrogen issues dropping off. So that's more prone to injury. And now we've got this myth about you're not really going to lose weight while running. And so I would love for you to talk about that a little bit because I do think that a lot of women, when they get on the health kick, they do think running is going to be the answer as the magical exercise. So let's talk about this not
Yeah,
fat
I mean,
happening.
we've been programmed very successfully on both sides, the diet side and the exercise side, to envision this calories in, calories out model. And it's not so simple, and there are so many variables that we need to look at this with a little more big picture perspective. So, true, the number of calories burned versus the number of calories stored. So not eaten it's not calories eating and calories burned during exercise, but it's what you do with the calories and then the different types of food act different ways in the body and all those things that you've covered a lot on your show. So I think most of your sophisticated listeners, most people understand that it's not as simple as just reducing the number of calories you consume every day as reported in your food app, and then going out and burning more as you look at the screen on the machine. But if we need a little more reminder here, what happens is the body engages in an assortment of compensatory mechanisms when the workout exercise expenditure is too strenuous. And so if you get up at 6 a.m. and get on that bike seat and crank out that spinning class, or you're in the running scene and you want to hit your 30 miles a week or your 40 miles a week or whatever it is, and you go and huff and puff and get that done week in, week out, you're going to be a more lazy and a more lazy person throughout the day, and you're going to eat more food, particularly quick energy food that'll give you that boost because you're in a state of chronic exhaustion from overly stressful exercise program. So burning more calories is a way to tank your hormones, slow down your metabolism, and kick up your appetite when you're sitting on the couch that night after your 6 a.m. spin class because you didn't get enough sleep and you have a variety of other stress factors that are overloading the stress side of the balance scale, and you're not getting enough restoration and recovery.
I mean, I've seen this to be true in my practice. I've seen it be true myself when I would run more or do different more like cardio types of exercise. Now, of course, what I do want to get across, and I want to get your opinion on this because there's a lot of noise out there about too much intensity, not enough intensity. How much do we actually do? What do you advise for folks? Because I do feel like if there's 2 days a week where I do a little bit of a sprint workout or something that I speed up, I do better. That's just me. But what have you kind of been advising folks on? Because there is that noise about intensity, not, too much, do this, do that. And it's kind of got people spinning a little.
Yeah. Well, I mean, high intensity interval training protocols are so popular. That's kind of the biggest uh, type of protocol in the fitness scene. So the branded workouts, the things you do at home or the things you do in the gym are mostly of the hit variety. So you go to boot camp, you go to spin class, you go to bar, you do the home-based workout that takes you through a somewhat stressful and very challenging workout where you're asked to perform over and over at medium to high intensity, and then you recover and you go through these interval sequences. And in research, you can see that these deliver really quick fitness benefits in comparison to just trudging on the stair climber or walking around the park every day because you need to get your muscles working and you need to get your heart rate up, and that will stimulate these fitness benefits. The problem is the amount of intensity that you can handle. Let's say the number of intervals or the amount of hard work that you can handle in a week and absorb and benefit from without breaking down is predicated on the size of your aerobic base or your overall aerobic capacity. So if you look at the Olympic runners that we enjoyed watching in Paris in the summer of 2024, the guys who are racing in the mile, the 1500s, short of a mile, the race lasts for 3.5 minutes. Routinely, they are running over 100 miles a week overall in their training to get really good at racing for less than 1 mile. And the long distance guys, the marathoners, are running massive amounts of volume at a comfortable pace. So they're building up their aerobic capacity so that when they do throw down those very impressive interval workouts that you can watch them do on YouTube. Jakob Ingebrigtsen, the greatest middle distance runner in the world, does a go-to workout of 25 quarters. So that's a one lap around the track at a very fast pace. I think somewhere around a minute. With some, a break in between them, but it's like the most awesome, amazing interval workout that you can't even imagine how difficult. But in order to actually perform a workout like that, that is coming off of or launching off of a base of 100 plus miles per week of running day in, day out, year in, year out. So the average person at home that wants to go do a very stressful a spin class where they're pushing you and you're doing 30-second sprint, 30-second rest, 30-second sprint, 30-second rest, or whatever it is. Um, Ideally, you'd want to have a massive amount of easy pedaling and easy movement to build the aerobic system so that workout is not overly stressful. There's another thing that we seem to overlook in the fitness scene, and that is a true sprint workout delivers a tremendous amount of fitness benefits with minimal risk if you do it correctly. And when we say sprint, the true definition of sprint in the human is we can only maintain maximum effort for around 7 seconds. That's the ATP creatine phosphate system in the cell. So a sprint is anything 7 seconds or below. And if you continue to go hard for beyond that, it's not a true sprint. It's sort of into a hybrid where you're recruiting other energy systems. And it's still, a valuable training protocol. And there's all kinds of different interval workouts and sprint types of sessions. But what I recommend for the average fitness enthusiast that wants to step things up and make some really great breakthroughs without burning out from doing too many exhaustive interval workouts is to sprint for around 10 to 20 seconds. 10 seconds would be something high impact like running on the ground or running up a hill. Or 20 seconds would be something like on a bike or a rowing machine where there's little to no impact. So the appropriate time to sprint is between 10 and 20 seconds, no longer than 20 seconds, because then you start to get into the realm of high intensity interval training, and it can be too difficult for most people. But if you can work that top end once in a while, once a week is fine, to do just a handful of sprints. So I'm talking 4 to 8 sprints of 10 to 20 seconds, maybe once a week, once every 10 days is fine. You will get tremendous fitness stimulation. It'll improve your performance at all lower levels of exercise intensity because when you get good at sprinting, you get really good at going medium or going comfortably, right? It's just how the body works as well as perceived exertion. Like, gee, my usual running pace feels easier because I completed a series of 6 sprints lasting 12 seconds, and that's part of my training protocol now. So what we really need to do overall, and we've been talking about this in the Primal Blueprint fitness model for many years, is honor our ancestral fitness experience and our genetic expectations for these inputs, which is to move more throughout the day. Of course, we need to get up and move, and that's how the running boom got started. It's like, hey, it's better than sitting on the couch. Running around the park or the block is great, but if you're doing it too stressfully, then you start to look at problems. So we need to move more at a comfortable pace. Of course, we need to engage in resistance exercise where we're working the muscles to a point of fatigue and getting, breathing hard and actually putting your muscles under load, under challenge. And then finally, we need to sprinkle in some brief, explosive, all-out sprints, which have the tremendous anti-aging and the hormonal benefits without the risk of breakdown, burnout, illness, and injury that comes from an aggressive HIIT-style training regimen, which is what most people in the gym are doing, or an overly stressful chronic cardio regimen, which is the running scene where people are out there jogging at slightly too significantly too stressful of a pace and doing it day after day after day as they train for these glorified events like the marathon and the Ironman.
Hey, health junkies, if your feet aren't happy and healthy, the rest of you could suffer from low back pain all the way up to neck pain. And yes, even gut issues can be related to your feet because your feet are connected to your nervous system. Happy feet equal one less thing the nervous system has to worry about. I want to tell you about Peluva. This is a new zero-drop minimalist shoe with a distinctive 5-toe design. Peluvas give you the most authentic barefoot style experience, but with sufficient cushioning to use in everyday movement, fitness, and athletic activities. Peluvas are super stylish, so you also get a barefoot shoe that looks good too. Perhaps you've heard of toe separators. Peluva shoes have spaces for each one of your toes, so you can ditch those separators. They're stylish and comfy shoes that you are going to be walking in style and feeling good in no time. Check out peluva.com for more information, and if you like what you see, enter the code HEALTHFIX, HEALTHFIX, for money off your Peluva purchase. Let's get back to the podcast. I'm glad you bring this point up of the day after day after day, because I think, for a lot of people, it's easy, right, to throw on a pair of shoes and go, but it's just as easy to throw on a pair of shoes and walk too. But we have it stuck in our head,
Yeah.
we got to burn a little harder, we got to do this a little harder, we got to go a little harder. And really for a lot of my patients and for myself included, one of the biggest things that happens is like you said, the breakdown of the body when we keep pushing same things over and over again. Now, I wanted to hear a little bit about your take on intensity because I do think it's important, but I like that you say build up to it because I think a lot of people will think, okay, then 2 days a week, I'm going to do sprint workouts and they've never sprinted before in their life, right? So this is good to learn how to ramp it up.
And
Now,
anybody can start sprinting because you can do it on a bicycle or rowing machine or something that's low impact, no impact. It's just getting that heart rate up and huffing and puffing until you're in discomfort, which, if you never do that, you're going to use it or lose it. And that's the essence of aging and accelerated aging is, yeah, back in the day, you used to be strong and explosive and you played basketball and you did this and you did that. And now you're relegated to shuffling down the road and it's a whole element of fitness that's I think widely disrespected as we prefer to engage in the HIIT or the chronic endurance training.
yeah. Yeah. I'll admit, even I thought to myself, because, and I want to get your take on this, because zone two cardio is the hot topic, how to do it right, how to do it. We'll get into that because I want to get your opinion on it. I kind of, when I went to doing that as my main cardio, in addition to my sprints, I kind of felt like, oh, I'm not doing enough. Brad, I'm not doing enough. I'm not getting my runner's
The
high.
little voice inside Jannine is whispering, "What are you doing, you lazy? Come on."
You lazy butt, what are you doing? So let's talk about zone two. Because what I do have to say, and just so folks who are actively engaged in what we're talking about here, I have seen benefits from walking. I absolutely have. I've seen my body look a heck of a lot better than when I was trying to push myself running a lot and biking a lot. So let's talk about zone two cardio. What does zone two cardio mean to you, Brad? And like how do you coach your folks on zone two cardio?
Yeah, I'm really pleased to see this term and this idea rise to popularity in the endurance training community because the intensities are generally divided into these five zones, with zone five being an all-out sprint and zone one being comfortable walking or medium brisk walking or whatever. It depends on the fitness of the person. We're going to get into that shortly. So zone two. The limit of zone two before you bump into zone three is called fat max. And that's a really, really important concept for any exerciser to understand. And your fat max heart rate, these zones are measured by heart rate, by the way. So it's not just like, hey, this feels like zone four. It's, trying to divide these things and categorize them so you're exercising at a percentage of your max heart rate and you understand where your zones are. Of course, you can go pay for an expensive laboratory test, but Dr. Phil Maffetone, arguably one of the leading endurance coaches of all time, he's coached many world champions. He came up with the MAF formula, which is 180 minus your age in beats per minute is the fat max, or he calls it the MAF heart rate. And this is also equated with the top of the zone two. So if one is 40 years old, like I'm not, I'm almost 60. So let's use me. Hey, 180 minus 60 is 120 is my fat max heart rate estimated. A 40-year-old, 180 minus 40 would use the number 140. And so you set the beeper alarm on your heart rate monitor, and you realize that when you exceed 140, you have left zone two and you're now into zone three. So the popularity of zone two is because you're getting a true fat burning workout with a minimal amount of anaerobic stimulation, stress hormones, and turning the workout into a different category of a more stressful session. And so you want the vast majority of your steady state cardiovascular exercise to be at or below the zone two fat max limit. Why is it called fat max? That's the maximum number of fat calories per minute that your body can burn during exercise. So envision if you were to speed up, of course, you're going to burn more calories, right? The faster you go, the more calories you burn. When you're sprinting, you're burning 1,000 per hour rate, but when you're jogging, you're burning 300, whatever. But when you exceed fat max, you start burning less fat in favor of a quick spike in the amount of glucose or carbohydrate calories that you're burning. So, not to go in deep into exercise physiology, but it's really important to get competent at that fat burning heart rate and below so that you can be a true endurance athlete because endurance is predicated on being good at fat burning and preserving glycogen. If that was too wordy for the recreational enthusiasts, let's just say that Zone 2 has become popular because it's comfortably paced. It emphasizes fat burning. It's not entirely fat burning. So when you go in the gym and you see at 9:30 a.m. is the fat burning workout, it's not all fat. It's just emphasizing fat and burning fat at the highest rate in the case of fat max heart rate or the top of zone 2. And so when you can operate in these fat burning zones, you finish the workout and you feel refreshed and energized rather than a little bit buzzed and fatigued and perhaps craving a quick treat next door at Jamba Juice with the medium smoothie and the breakfast scone, which we've done research when I used to work for the spinning company. A spin class of 40 minutes burns around 650 calories, and the medium smoothie and the breakfast scone is like 670 or something. So, boop, that goes down before we even get home and start to eat breakfast. So anyway, that's what's good about urging people to slow down, monitor their heart rate, and emphasize this zone 2. But here's the part where I have a huge problem with the dogma that's happening right now around this is that I think zone 1 has been disrespected and kicked to the curb.
It
So now
has.
people are thinking that it's tough enough to slow down when you see that zone 2 beeper alarm going off. It's a very comfortable pace, like you alluded to. And so people are frustrated and saying, I feel like I'm not really getting a workout when I'm in zone 2. But when you, again, make that comparison to the elite athletes, it's anywhere in zone 1 or zone 2 is delivering fantastic aerobic stimulation with a minimum amount of stress or breakdown or recovery time needed. And that's how you build up comfortably and safely without that risk of overdoing it. And here's my other problem with zone 2 is that most highly motivated type A goal focused endurance folks, that personality that is attracted to this type of training, their zone 2 is a lot of times zone 2.3 or zone 2.4 because they just can't seem to bring themselves to respect that beeper alarm. And then you'll get the rationale where they said, well, it was only for a couple of hills. Well, it was only because at the end it got hot and my heart rate going up, but I kept the same pace. So we have to remember that the heart rate is the ultimate way to measure exercise intensity. It takes into account all the variables, such as if you didn't get good sleep last night or you're overtrained, you're going to see that reflected in your heart rate where you might have to slow down. The other thing most people don't understand is we've been socialized to try to maintain a steady pace, but the pace per mile is irrelevant to the body. The body only knows effort as measured by heart rate. So in the vast majority of your workouts, you're going to want to steadily slow down the longer the workout goes in order to maintain a consistent heart rate or stay in the correct zone. And that's maybe not as much fun as checking off the miles and looking at your fancy watch that's telling you you're keeping to your pace. And of course, that's what you want to do in a race. But in everyday training, you want to be very careful to respect the heart rate and realize that zone 1 training is incredibly beneficial. It's just not maybe as much of an endorphin buzz as pushing that, zone 2.5, which is what most people do at the vast majority of their exercise. And it's a disastrous way to train. And the research on elite athletes, Dr. Seiler, an American based in Norway, is one of the leaders here. You might have heard of the 80-20 principle, and the black hole, which is what they call the in-between zones, where it's too difficult to be considered a fat burning workout or a zone two, but it's not challenging enough to be considered, a breakthrough session that's going to increase your fitness because you're pushing the edge with your interval training. And so most people are going at this medium to difficult steady state that's too stressful, that leads to chronic overuse injuries, suppressed immune function, problems with their hormones and metabolic system that you see in the office, and they're neglecting the lower end exercise, which is the true secret to building your aerobic capacity safely, and then being able to handle the hard workouts that you occasionally throw in, or be able to race with more competency because you're so good at fat burning.
Oh, so many good things there. So many good things there. I like to hear about not kicking zone one to the curb because I really do think that I've come to really enjoy it. It's a great walk. It's a great, you can listen to podcasts, things of that nature, and just enjoy it yourself. Just look at the neighbors, right? See everything that's going on. Check out your neighborhood. Now, I think a lot of people might be thinking, Brad, okay, so I'm a runner. I love running. How do I transition from running to walking? How do we dial it down? Do we go straight to two? Do we like what have you done with folks to kind of wean them off the running gig?
Well, someone who's an endurance runner with goals and pretty serious and been logging the mileage, it's essential to monitor your heart rate at all the workouts. And so now if you take this 180 minus age formula and determine what kind of pace that equates to, you will reveal whether you should be running or walking. And I'm sorry to break the news to you, but for the vast majority of even serious runners, walking is going to be a better use of their training time for the vast majority of their training time. Again, I'm going to reference the elite athletes. We have Eliud Kipchoge, the greatest marathon runner of all time, maybe one of the arguably, the greatest endurance machine that's ever been on Earth. He won two Olympic gold medals. He set the world record and was the first person to break 2 hours in the marathon. And he's a long time leader in endurance, even back on the track in Olympic running. And he published his training log for all the world to enjoy and analyze. And the exercise physiologists have had a field day and they go and study him training in Kenya. It has been determined that he runs 82 to 84% of his weekly mileage at a zone one pace, and then another 13 or something percent at zone two, and then a nice little chunk at the top where he's doing these phenomenal interval workouts that, again, you can go watch him do 8 times 1,000 meters on the track in 2:47 or whatever sensational. These guys are machines when they're able to run a marathon under 2 hours. But for the most part, he is running at a pace equating to a medium or brisk walk for a super fit person. And we need to honor the example set by the top athletes, even more so than science, in my personal opinion, because you can see the fitness magazines have done this for decades, where they take a bunch of college kids in the study and they slam some interval workouts 3 days a week, and they lose weight and they get fitter in 6 weeks. And there's the conclusion that you should do high intensity interval training too to get that six pack really quick. And we're taking these snapshots out of context without realizing that hard training works for people who are in really great shape before they conduct that hard workout. So to think that the greatest marathoner on the planet is running along now, is he walking for his training? No, because he's such an incredible endurance machine that if you were to see him running down in your neighborhood, he's moving. He's moving really fast. He's moving at 626 to 803 pace per mile during these runs. But to you and I, that's like a medium or even a slow walk for a big chunk of training.
Because his heart is cardiovascular.
He's at zone one heart rate, running a 6 minute mile. This is someone who runs 4 minutes 34 seconds for an entire marathon. And so he's running a minute and a half to 3.5 minutes slower than his marathon pace. It's what is it, 43 to 68% slower or something. It's in the book. So if someone wants at home to calculate, and let's calculate a moment, because the average marathon time across the world of 2 million finishers is 4:31. That's a 10:18 pace per mile. That is a really impressive fitness achievement to go 26 miles at a 10-minute per mile pace. But a 10-minute per mile pace is not flying down the sidewalk. It's, plugging along and, getting it done and getting to that dang finish line before you collapse. So congratulations, get that finisher medal, put it on your wall. But in training for the marathon, if you want to honor Kipchoge and do 82 to 84% of your weekly mileage at that easy to moderate zone one pace, let's take 10:18 and go 40 to 60% slower than that. You are bumping up against the magical cutoff point of the human gait switching from jogging to walking, and that is 13:57 per mile in most cases. So we're going to say a 14-minute mile is where you switch from jogging to brisk walk. And so you look at your finishing time in the marathon, you look at your MAF heart rate. If you're running 6 miles and you want to keep it under 140, what pace does that equate to? And for the vast majority of participants, it would be a brisk walk, maybe a slow jog if you're really fit and you've done a bunch of marathons and maybe you can do 4 hours or 3:45 or whatever your time is. But again, the average time being 4:30, that means, a million marathoners are slower than that. And they're going 5 hours or 5:15 or 5:30 or 6 hours, which is a walk in itself. And thereby the training should be walking. So what's the benefit of switching from a jogging gait to a walking gait is A, you're not going to get injured because you're reducing that impact trauma. And B, you're not going to overstress the cardiovascular, hormonal, endocrine, immune system because the workout is going to stay in that comfortable zone one or zone two heart rate. So all that's going to happen is you're going to feel better, you're going to have more energy, and I think maybe it's a good time to circle back to that reduction of fat as the primary goal. We're going to assume that's the main goal for most runners. What happens when you start moving more throughout the day is you get better at fat metabolism 24/7, but you don't kick in these compensatory reactions that I talked about earlier from overly stressful workouts, which is, we could call it the Ben and Jerry's effect, where you do the 6 a.m. spin class and you're going shopping at 6 p.m. for Ben and Jerry's. However, if you were to swap out a stressful gym workout for a 1 hour walk around the neighborhood, you'd come back, you'd feel more creative, your body doesn't feel broken down, and your appetite and your mood and your daily energy level are regulated thanks to the exercise. And this is also human evolutionary biology. Humans are designed to move frequently, near nonstop throughout the day. That's our genetic mandate for health. We have the research from the modern day Hadza in Tanzania, where they're walking, they're moving. Even when they're resting, they're squatting, so they're putting their body under load, so they're not sitting on a couch or kicking back, except for sleeping. Really, that's our human ideal, is moving in little ways, little tidbits here, little tidbits there. Little things do add up a lot. So if you take a 1 minute break every hour to walk around the office complex or walk around the block or whatever, these are the things that are going to contribute to your fat reduction with more reliability than pounding out those calories with running. And you mentioned that, people have a transformation of their physique from stopping running, slowing down to a walk, and keeping that daily movement objective high, and then hitting the high intensity where you do the true genetic signaling for muscle building and fat reduction.
I mean, I can't stress it enough how important what you're saying is about movement. Because so many people, like you said, kind of the Ben and Jerry's effect, but also they beat themselves up in the morning. The rest of the day they're sitting around because they're so tired, right? And I've been there before, and I did CrossFit. I couldn't function by the time 4 o'clock came around. I was on my feet all day doing acupuncture in my office, but my husband would be like, "Let's go for a walk." I couldn't even get it. I was like zone 0.25 because I couldn't move. I was so tired. And this is a problem. It's a
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. I mean, we have a whole chapter dedicated to this concept that the psychologists have termed the obligate runner. and the obligate runner is one where they don't feel whole or complete or happy unless they've completed their daily workout, and they train themselves to a point where the exhaustion and the stress is so high that they compromise their health. So the obligate runner keeps going and keeps plugging away until something breaks in the form of an overuse injury, or they have, actual mental health and psychological harm attributed to their habit or their addiction. And we touch on that a little bit. The addiction is certainly superior to the truly destructive addictions, and therefore it doesn't get enough attention in society because we really want to handle the people with the crisis addictions. However, in fact, even worse, running is often used as a therapeutic approach to heal from addiction because it gives you a sustained dopamine release, unlike a drug hit. And so people find, and this is quoting psychology experts. I'm not just spouing this. People find that they have a better resiliency rate when they pick up running to stay away from their previous addiction. So all that's wonderful, and congratulations to all the people that have broken free. But I think in general, we need to consider this idea that running or training in general can be addictive in nature. So that might be the gym rat who's addicted to showing up at some class every morning, whether it's spinning bar on Tuesday, boot camp on Wednesday, and these things that give you that endorphin high, which we're all chasing and we all appreciate so much. And we're all, finding that in different ways, whether it's using the mobile device or getting indulgent food or streaming entertainment. We're all addicts in that sense. And exercise is right up there on the list. Dr. Lustig wrote a great book called The Hacking of the American Mind, where he listed the vices and the marketing forces behind them that are luring us into these addictive behaviors for profit. And the fitness world doesn't really get a lot of criticism up there with the cigarette world and the social media app developers, but it's something to consider whether you've crossed over that point where you're pushing yourself too hard, you're getting that quick endorphin buzz, and then the rest of your life, as you describe, is paying the consequences.
It's definitely not getting enough buzz. It's something to talk about, and I'm glad you mentioned that. And I think I've definitely teetered on that over the years, and I know there's definitely a lot of folks in my practice that we try to work on it. Now, one of the things I definitely wanted to mention before we wrap up here is the shoe wear, and what we're wearing for shoes. Because guys, Brad gifted me some Paluvas not too long ago. Used them for walking. Amazing. Um, Game changer for me because at the time I had kind of fell into another marketing thing. There's been the barefoot versus the cushy foot shoes, as I call them. And my friends kept telling me, "Oh, you gotta try these ultras out. You gotta try these ultras out." Jacked my ankles up so bad
Mm.
having them because the cushioning, I was so used to a zero or a barefoot style of shoe. And then I went to the ultras, and then Brad sent me the Paluvas, and I went back to, nope, this is what I need. So give folks a little bit of how, in addition to all of the pounding of just your body weight running, 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 and then now we got the cushy coffin shoes.
Right. So I'm thinking back to Phidippides and his contribution to the running boom, or the poet. I should get his name that made up that fake poem. Took poetic license with Greek history. But the true catalyst for the running boom was the invention of the elevated cushioned running shoe by Nike in the early 70s. And what this allowed was opening the floodgates for ordinary people to be able to take off down the road and participate in endurance running. Because prior to the invention of the wonderful Nike Waffle Trainer shoe, was really the first one that it really launched the boom. Running was too stressful, and you felt it immediately in the form of painful feet because your foot took the most brunt, and the shoes were really rudimentary. They were, a firm, rigid sole with no padding, and that was just the limiting factor to where the average person could maybe only run for a mile or two. And the only people who were runners in the early days were the ex-high school and collegiate runners. And so almost all runners back in the 70s when the running boom started were slender, very well trained. They had the rudimentary shoes and they were, going along and running actually fast times. So the marathon times have gotten slower and slower over the decades, which is a good thing because that means more people are doing it, right? It's not criticizing anything. But the shoes were a true and honest limiting factor. And so when you take away the that and put someone in a cushioned shoe, what happens is the comfort of the shoe destroys your proprioception, your awareness of your body moving through space, such that you cannot immediately experience the impact trauma generated by your crappy form. Because remember, ordinary people taking off running 5 miles or 3 miles or 10 miles, they don't have the athletic competency to run with the correct midfoot landing over a balanced center of gravity, like you see a beautiful runner in the Olympics. Instead, they're shuffling along with what's what widely observed as an overstriding, jarring, breaking gait pattern. And that the reason for that are many, but it's all due to lack of fitness. So we have tight hip flexors, tight hamstrings, we have weak glutes, we have all this list of things that it's in the book and the running experts can spout as why people run with poor form. So the elevated cushion shoes allowed the masses to run with poor form without immediately sensing it because the cushion took away from your awareness of what it's doing to your body. By contrast, if you want to get what I'm saying here, if you were to take off your shoes right now and run barefoot on a hard surface like an indoor gymnasium or a sidewalk, a safe sidewalk that didn't have glass on it, if you take off down the road and run in barefoot on a hard surface, you will immediately exhibit perfect, beautiful running technique. You'll be as light on your feet as a deer, and you will float down the sidewalk, and you will know right away what it's like to run with good form because you're unable to take more than a few strides with your crappy shuffling, breaking, overstriding form. However, in shoes, you can maintain that crappy form for miles and miles without the immediate sensation because the shoes just feel so fantastically comfortable. And so we have now the super cushion shoes that feel like you're cruising along the trail on pillows for the whole day of an ultra marathon race. Now, there is a price to pay down the line because you're still getting that jarring breaking stride. You're still dispersing the impact trauma throughout your lower extremities in an inappropriate manner, and that's where the overuse injuries come up. And so again, this is validated by research, not just my conjecture, that running shoes are the driving cause of this massive rate of running injuries. So the exact opposite of what they're saying in their marketing messaging for 50 years, that these cushioned shoes help you, help ease the impact on hard surfaces. It's the exact opposite happening because they are allowing a bad thing to happen that would not happen if you were in bare feet. Now, the obvious follow-up here is that because we're doing something so incredibly unnatural, as to run 5 or 10 or 26 miles coming off of your desk job and putting on your shoes and heading down the road, you need the shoes to do it. So I'm not saying, hey, take off your shoes. You should all run barefoot down the sidewalk. That's not going to work. Nor is it going to work to put on some paluvas, which are our answer. It's a barefoot inspired shoe. It has some nice cushioning, so it feels good to walk down the sidewalk. But running in them would not be a sensible idea out of the gate for anyone because we're not adapted to it because we spent a whole lifetime wearing these elevated cushion shoes that ruin our proprioception, that allow us and enable us to exhibit poor technique and are the driving cause of injuries. So I think you brought up this important element to the story because, again, when you slow down to a walk, you can walk with great competency in a barefoot shoe right away because you're not risking the impact trauma. And then you're getting your feet, your arches, your Achilles tendons stronger and more resilient. You're allowing them to go through the entire range of motion, which they're not allowed to in an elevated cushion shoe. And that's why the shoes are causing more atrophy and therefore, over the long term, just a pattern of repeated injuries thanks to the shoes that you need to do something that's unnaturally and overly stressful for the human.
Mm. So many things that were supposed to be good for us. It's just like this marketing lies. It just kills me, Brad. I'm glad that you guys did all this research for your book, Born to Walk. It really does help us to understand and also helps us docs who are trying to push the walking a little bit more with our patients to be able to walk more to get the mobility and things of that nature. It helps us to make like really make the case for folks to see why
Yeah,
it's
you're getting a fantastic workout. I mean, your heart rate is more than double. As soon as you get up out of your chair and walk around the block, you're in training. And for some reason, we've disrespected this because the struggle and suffer ethos of the fitness industry is what sells. And so when we're looking at a commercial for Peloton bike, you see the person dripping in sweat and high-fiving the person next to them, or whatever the message is like if you push yourself hard enough, you're going to get a six pack too. And this is, something it's starting to unwind a little. I think people are getting smarter and realizing that they can't just go crush workouts starting on January 1st, because on April Fool's Day, they're going to end up on the sideline, injured, burnt out, tired. So I think the fitness industry is getting more sensible. But I also think there's a lot of people that are too intimidated to get started because they think the starting point is joining a marathon training club and going from 0 to 6 months later crossing the marathon finish line, which is the template for the group training programs that comprise a quarter of all marathon participants. Again, there's a lot of positive aspects to these things. I'm just urging you to do it correctly and slow down and possibly make walking the centerpiece of your life as it has been for millions of years for the human.
so huge, so huge. I'm so glad that you and Mark teamed up to put this book together for folks. It's going to be really helpful for folks to really hear this. Let's tell folks where other places they can find you guys, where they can get some more background on it, such as your website, of course, your podcast, all the things, because I think folks are going to definitely want to jump in and learn some more.
Right. This book's available for pre-order, but the official release date is January 7th.
Okay.
You can learn more about the book at borntowalkbook.com. And you can find me on Instagram, Brad Kearns1, and the B Rad podcast, and there'll be plenty of content about this really important topic. And again, if I came off offensive to anyone or negative about running, I want your listeners to know that this was my life for so many years and brought me so much joy. And the intensity of competition when I was a young high school and collegiate runner and professional triathlete. And there's so many wonderful aspects to it. But looking back and realizing and knowing what I know now, there's a way to become even a great athlete and a really accomplished athlete in a way that doesn't destroy your health. And that's what we want to share with everybody, and starts with moving more every day and building that baseline aerobic competency.
So important, so important. I think this will be good for folks to hear. And guys, yeah, I've worked with some former NFL athletes. It's not pretty when you push yourself to the limits and don't take care. So, hearing from Brad and other folks in the industry, this is important. This is important to listen to because, a lot of folks I know who listen to this podcast are in their 30s and 40s. And for us, I'm late 40s now. I've seen the injuries start coming. And
Mhm.
Brad, and you guys, if you look at Brad online, holy cow, six pack and all, push it and not and like
I've turned into a sprinter and a high jumper in my old age, and my endurance days are behind me. And the stuff that I did was quite extreme because I did it at the highest level. So I think it's a young person's game in a lot of ways. And my idea that the marathon should only be 13.1 miles, especially if you're over 40 or over 50. Realize that these extreme endurance events are a young person's game, and you have really no correlation with health or longevity. In fact, a very strong risk and correlation with accelerated aging when you're doing these extreme events that are often addictive. So there's other avenues out there to express your competitive juices, and I definitely try to stand for that now. Where I've learned like what's most aligned with health and longevity are things that are really fun and shorter in duration in many cases. And we glorify the marathon as the ultimate achievement for runners, but what about improving your own 5K time at the annual turkey trot in Athens, Wisconsin, and feeling like an athlete and feeling like you have a time and striving to improve and doing things that make you feel good every single day as you're training, rather than fighting that battle against fatigue and injury that most people are right on the teeter-totter all the time.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I definitely would. That's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. And I know a lot of folks definitely are going to benefit from hearing this, Brad. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about Born to Walk. So good. Can't wait for that to come out in January. Guys, go pre-order it now. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Jannine.
Hey, fellow health junkie. Thanks for listening to the Health Fix podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please help support me to get the word out about the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review, and just get that word out. Thanks again for listening.